Mesdames, Messieurs, l'Institut national du patrimoine et le château de Fontainebleau.
On behalf of the INHA and the Château de Fontainebleau, we are happy to welcome you for the 9th Festival on Art History. We're going to now have a presentation on the words of the artist, Peter Johansson. We have 3 speakers, Sarah Arrhenius, Peter Johansson, and Sinziana Ravini.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for inviting us. I'm very honored to be here with Sarah Arrhenius, the director of Royal Academy of Fine Arts in Stockholm, also former director of Bonniers Konsthall, also director of the Swedish magazine called Nous, and has done several biennials and very important exhibitions, creating links between art and literature. One of the best was Against Time. And here besides me I have Peter Johansson, that I would say is one of the most controversial Swedish artists we have today, yeah, without exaggerating. And yesterday I even called you the Salman Rushdie of contemporary art, because you have not a fatwa but almost on your head hanging like a you know. Yeah, so thank you so much for having come here, so many of you. And I'm going to start by asking you to show this 10 minutes film. Yeah. Can you say something?
It's just a short 6 minutes film, actually. And it's sound and pictures. And I hope you will like it.
Sträck ut din hand och finn en hand i din. Så gjorde jag och fann en hand i min. Sträck ut din hand. Gåtfulla jord, du gör mig förundrad. Frihetens tid lämnar märkliga spår. Ögon av sorg söker himmelens stjärnor som sprider sitt ljus på den väg där vi går. Sträck ut din hand och finn en hand i din. Så gjorde jag och fann en hand i min. Sträck ut din hand och bygg en mänsklig bro. Vi bygger från land till land. Sträck ut din hand. Admire, can't afford the beauty of it.
Thank you. Well, I was thinking of begin by asking you this question. It's quite difficult, I would say, to answer, but I'm sure you have a great answer to it. How would you say that your art is contributing to the image of Sweden today? Would you say that you are deconstructing the notion of culture, or would you rather say that you are reconstructing it, Swedishness as such?
I think I used both ways, actually, depending on the work and also depending on what idea of what I will attack, in a way. The things you have seen here is stuff that is made in like 20 years of time, up till 2010. So after that, I've been working with projects more personal about my family and my the interesting things that was in my childhood. So I think these images are way back for me, but I think nowadays it's still, and I think it's even worse, the Swedishness and the problems with nationalism, for instance, and the neo-Nazis working very public nowadays. So I think you need the both ways to attack, in a way.
Comment on that, Sarah?
It was really interesting to see these images again. So I've been following Peter's work since the early 90s, writing a bit about it. We also did a project together, the booth of the newspaper Aftonbladet at the book fair in Gothenburg for several years. And it's interesting to see because the way that you, at that time, I think we considered your work much more playful. And it really felt it was about humor, it was about tossing around the idea of Swedishness. And I don't think so many people felt threatened by it. But then, and this is how time and the change in political condition actually change art. So when you see this again, you can see that there was a shift, and the shift is the piece with the skinheads, which I think you should talk more about later. But just briefly, the art piece was actually that you paid a couple of skinheads. It was not actors. Was it actors? It actors to just fool around and destroy things. And the funding came from the Swedish Visual Art Fund. Yeah, I founded it, and then suddenly a very heated discussion broke out. Is this the way that we should use Swedish taxpayers' money? And I felt at the time that suddenly no one, especially when people understood that it was actors, it became quite mean, the debate, and you were really attacked, and also the Visual Art Fund. And this was in a time in Sweden when I think that the discussion changed and became quite much darker in terms of how suddenly people felt threatened about with your work, how you were suddenly not playing around with national identity, but suddenly it was perceived as you attacked Swedishness. And I know that since then your work has also been attacked, and you have been a victim also of hate in social media. So this is something that suddenly makes the image, the possibility to work like you do, so much different. Then something that also adds a lot is in the early 90s, I mean, how you played around with the idea of national and also Nazism in your work. I mean, we of course took it seriously, but it was not located so clearly as it is now in Dalarna, which is one of the sites in Sweden where neo-Nazis are very, very strong. So the work is, I mean, if you read it now, it's totally different, a very different story. And it's also a sad story, I think, because that's how Sweden has developed.
The people that was attacking me in the 90s, the skinheads and the neo-Nazis, they turned into a Swedish Democratic Party, actually. They are now in the government, and they are acting with other sort of clothes, but they have the same ideas, actually. So those people I met in those days, they are now the people who is deciding on actually money for art, for instance. So that's very interesting. They have changed. So then I think I have to change also and be more. I think I have more hate in me today than I had in the 90s, actually. I think it's a worse problem now. So you have to change your way of doing art.
And how do you think that you can change them? Or do you think that art can change people and society? Or do you think that it's impossible to change their mentality through your artwork?
I don't think I can change them, actually. But just to feel normal in a way, you have to act and do something. And hopefully some more people see your work and get a thought, a little flower grows somewhere. And yeah, it's a sort of way of living, actually. You have to be up there and doing something, I think.
And what did provoke them the most? What do these Nazis have against you mostly? I mean, what, if we speak about aesthetics and the way you work with laughter and so on, what are they so much against, for example?
From the beginning, I think it was that I used their own material in a way. Their clothes, they had, in a way, the Swedish flag was suddenly not for everybody. It was more of a symbol of neo-Nazi people. And I used all that and made them look silly, actually. And I made them, I made people laugh at their movement and what they are doing. And I think that was stupid, actually. So, yes, for me, I got really a lot of trouble out of that. And so I think humor, because I'm working more with humor than irony, I think humor is more from the heart, in a way. So I try to do art that is through my heart, and I hope that they can feel it, really.
When you speak about humor, I mean, how would you say that you work with this humor? Perhaps you should talk about the piece that was showed in Castles and how you. I mean, for my students, for example, when I show your work to my students in France, I ask them whether they think that they are real Nazis or not. And usually they vote, and 50% say no, they must be real Nazis, and then 50 say no, it must be actors. And one student said once, it doesn't matter, I don't want to know. The question is much more interesting, not knowing. But how can you tell us about the work, how you did it?
It is a floating house, a Swedish red color, farlig röd färg it's called. And on that floating thing, you had 3 skinheads played by actors. For me, that was not a choice. It was clear that I didn't want to work with the Nazis, actually. I really would like to pay my friends instead to do this piece. And then we set up some rules. They should be there for 4 months, and they should eat a breakfast. They should play around, and then it was time for some lunch or something more to drink. Then it was more drinks and drinks, and then it was barbecue. And after that, they got really, really drunk, and they should just kick out the house and everything every night, and then just disappear. So that was the rule for every day in 4 months. And the problem was that it was in the middle of industrial area, and it was so little people there, so they got really bored of this these rules of what you should do. So they went out to the city actually and tried to get people to see what happened in this harbor area. Then after 4 months, the whole house and everything should just be torn to pieces, and then they just leave. And that was the performance or installation, what you could call it. And the name was Little Sweden, like a sort of reference to Little Italy or something like that.
Now things start to come back in my head. I remember that the debate that came out of this, first everyone was very upset because they thought it was real skinheads and real Nazis. So then we talked about that with the media but then when everyone realized that it was actors, everyone became even more upset. Do you remember this? I think it was interesting because it was totally circular. You couldn't do it the right way. However,
No, in Münster, but Germany. No, I think it was 2000 actually. No, after a while, when everybody was talking about the skinheads and all that, suddenly some journalist read the homepage of the arrangeur, this Kunsthalle in Germany, and there it stood that it was actors. I never lied about that. It was just nobody who wanted to talk about it. It was a better story if it was real skinheads. So when it came through that it was actors, the people was upset. Could an artist lie like that? I think that was the big thing. I was lying.
Well, well, there are sometimes truthful lies also, but let's speak about what has happened now with humor within the alt-right movement, and Nazis are trying to appropriate humor, saying that the left people are so politically correct nowadays, so they think that, like Gramsci said, in order to get power, one first has to get cultural power. How are you reacting upon that? Do you think there's a danger there? Is there anything, such as Nazi humor? Does it exist today? And can you attack it? Continue working with humor today?
Nazi humor? Yes, absolutely. I think you have a lot of things like that. If you look onto their homepages, they have a lot, and it's usually about youth or about the left wing doing strange things, and it's easy to. I think, for instance, in Sweden we have a very special little brown thing, a delicatesse you use to eat, and it's called negerboll, a Negro ball. And then in the 90s that thing changed name, but on the home pages for these Nazi groups, they still are eating these balls. They are. They put a lot of picture of their families and friends eating these balls, and that I think is Nazi humor, actually.
It doesn't sound so sophisticated.
But it is there.
That would be interesting to hear you speak a little bit more about how you use humor in your work, because I think it actually has shifted. That your work in the 90s was a lot about humor, and it was very playful, and that's also how it was received. And I think if you look at the 90s art in the Nordic region, it had a lot of humor and playfulness and lightness, and no one was really scared about playing around with stereotype. It was not so politically loaded. But now when I see your work, it has shifted. I'm not so sure that you are so humoristic anymore. It's much more darker and sad in many ways. Do you find it more difficult to be humorous these days?
A good question, yes. I think the reactions on my art in the 90s gave me some thinking. I got a little bit first scared that my ideas and the stuff I did was going in the wrong direction, actually. It didn't work. Everybody was laughing, but no one did to care, actually. So for me, after this piece in Münster, this little Sweden, and all the reactions to that, I felt I really would like to go deeper down and really and see the problems and do art about that, and maybe leave the humor to someone else.
And why?
Well, I think it was just the belief that sometimes I think art can do more than just be an image or a laugh. It can maybe actually give a thought of something.
Another question I had was pretty much relating to the one you asked, Sara. How free do you feel as an artist today in relation to when you started? What has improved or become worse than before? So how free do you feel today?
Like you said, in the 90s it was more a laugh, and it was quite free, I think. But the reactions from the neo-Nazis and the skinheads movement and all that got me thinking about my family and all the problems it turned out to be to do all these things. And in a way I changed direction, but not, I think, changed. I was not afraid to do art, but I changed direction in a way. So I think it was clear. They gave me a reason to do something else, actually, to do more serious things. So I got angry and I got scared at the same time. And my reaction was to do more serious art.
Before we go to more the serious aspect of your art, do you think that we should and we can laugh about everything, or should there be borders to laughter today?
It's a really difficult question, actually. I think you have things you can't laugh at, actually. And sometimes I feel I can't do works about everything, actually, either. I don't want to be, embarrassing people with a belief or something. I don't know. I get a little bit scared about that sometimes.
But you see, it's interesting. Is that a shift over time? We talked earlier today in the panel about, the things that we felt was threatening art right now. And one thing I brought up was the freedom of speech and the self-censorship. And then we talked a little bit about the fact that art now travels out in a total different space because of social media, because how the media in general works. So you're a public figure in another sense that maybe 10 or 15 years ago. And I know that you are one of the artists that have been threatened because of your work. And do you think it did it limit your way of working if you would compare 20 years ago? Do you choose your subjects differently because of a different political climate?
I think I changed my my view in a way. So I went from these neo-Nazi attacks and the laughter into more my own family and the things that was happening in the small world in a way. And it can be as much problematic and I think important to work with things like that. So maybe it had to do with these feelings, and I got a little bit scared actually. So maybe that's why I turn into more family problems instead and did art about that. But I don't know. I'm still really angry, and I really want to try to do art that is about really problematic things, and how should that look? That's the thing for me. It's interesting to do art about problems in a way and try to solve them, but it's impossible. But it should be a way of working anyway for me.
I wonder if it's also a matter of how we can dismantle fear today in society. I mean, humor is a way of perhaps reacting in a defensive way against the things that make us feel fear. But how could you think one can dismantle the fear that people have towards strangeness or l'étranger or the foreigner? Do you have any examples of how you have tried to dismantle not only the stupidity of neo-Nazis, but also their intelligence, but also their own fear towards otherness?
I think I always use myself. I have that fear of other people also, and I have that these feelings about things are not right, and you have to be careful with who you're meeting and talking to. So I use myself, and I try to do out these feelings and do art about them. For me, I don't look at other people and what they are doing wrong. I try to use myself, and that's a lot of to do art about actually. Yeah, this is the material in a way.
So it's more the other within you that you're dealing with. Let's speak about the kulturskymningsprojektet. How does one, to begin with, translate kulturskymning? Do you have a good idea? In German it would be Götterdämmerung, no? But if you approach it and put it on culture, how would you call it? Dämmerung or skymning? Crépuscule, pas des dieux, mais de la culture. Crépuscule de la culture. Because the image we saw with Arne Weise, I don't know how many of you are not Swedish here, but Arne Weise is a very important TV figure who was very nice, and he, at the end of each year, at julafton, he lit the candles. The jula, yeah. And can you tell us a little bit about this Kulturskymnings project, which perhaps not the project in itself?
I just used that word once actually. It was together with this person, Arne Weise. He was a journalist who became the main face for the Swedish television under 40 years, I should say. And he was in Christmas time. He was the person who was introducing the programs in Christmas night and so on. And he was very, very famous and went around in Sweden. Very popular, yeah. And the thing was, I asked him to do some speeches for me for some of my vernissages, and he saw a possibility to do really to say something. So he did these fantastic speeches about racism and about populism and about pedophilia and things like that. Unbelievable, fantastic speeches. And he thought, if we do that, with an audience who has the time to stand still. He thought he could tell them something more and some important things that he couldn't say on television, for instance. So it was very interesting. So we came to an exhibition in Nässjö, and we decided to do that Kulturskymning T-shirt together, actually.
So would you say that we live at the end of, I mean, in a kulturskymningstid, in a, how do you say, crépuscule de la culture, and is Freud right that we vantrivs I kulturen, that we don't feel so much at home within culture, or not?
It's a difficult question, actually. No, I think I pass on that. I really don't know. If I feel so much at home, so I live in Copenhagen now, in Denmark. But from that point, looking at Sweden, I think I have double feelings. So it's like a love and hate story, and I don't think it's kulturskymning. I think it's possible to change, actually, things.
I realize I have so many questions. We haven't really had a panel ever, did we? So now I take my chance. I think there is a move in your work. If you look at the work that you did in the 90s, that was so much about the tradition of art historical tradition and what materials that were considered possible within art, but also how you could work with sculpture and the idea of colors that are high and low, and of course also pop and kitsch. And it all circulated a lot within the art world. You also did the calendar, I remember, with people posing nude from the Swedish art world as a really like a humorous project, but of course also about, I mean, what is the art world about, and how could you address that? And it felt like a lot of your work were addressing what is art, and something that really was directed toward a quite, I mean, specialized art audience. And then it moved somewhere else. It went out in the real world, so to say. And it would be interesting to see how you made that step, and suddenly those questions wasn't so important for you, because I think questions around sculpture and also materials were very important at the beginning, and especially color. And then you have to say the color red, why it's so important for you, because it comes back all the time.
If I should start with the color red, in Dalarna, Dalecarlia, this area in Sweden, in the middle of Sweden, it has become like a little Sweden, that too, in a way. You have a lot of souvenirs and symbols, food, and the folkloric dance and all that. It comes from that area, or the things that they do in Dalarna have been made to like Swedish symbols, actually. And you have a lot of red. You have the red house, the Faluröda huset, the red house. And you have the sausage, falukorven, it's red. You have a lot of stuff that is red. And this, everything. And I read a report in the beginning of the 90s that they had used like I think it was 6 families, and one family was living in a totally black apartment, and one in a yellow apartment, and one in a blue, and one in a red, and the one in a green, and one in a white, for 1 year. And the only thing they could actually see with sort of believe that in the red apartment, they could be really crazy. These people got scared, and they turn out fighting to each other and all that, just out of the color red. And I thought it was interesting to compare that to this part of Sweden, this redness, anger. So that's why. I use the red. And then I think red is, you can really see the color red. And it tells you all this about hate and blood and all the signals of selling stuff and all that. And it's a good color actually to make art with. And then yes, about when I went to the Royal Academy in Stockholm in the end of the 80s and beginning of the 90s, I was really interested in my colleagues and the professors and the artists turning up, showing their things and talking to us. And for me, it was like a conversation in a way, to do art about what they are doing and what they have done in art. And I tried to, through doing other stuff similar to their art, it was like a conversation in a way. And then after a while, when we start showing things, I met the public, and people were actually writing and talking and got upset and all that. And then I got thinking that you can really use art to do something more than just talk about art. So I turned my way to talk about racist questions and how we Swedes act when we meet other cultures or when we go to other cultures, and all that became more interesting in itself than the art question.
Would you say that Swedish people are very racist or not? I mean, unconsciously racist, more racist than they think they are.
I think not more racist than somewhere else. I think the people are racist, and then it's up to how we should overcome that feeling and those problems. I think we could say in the Nordic countries have worked a lot with it in different ways, in democratic ways. So I think I should say no.
Jean-Luc Godard said once that democracy is 15 minutes for Hitler, 15 minutes for the Jews, and we all know how that finished. And I was thinking now about your Sona project, which was pretty much a relational work, if I would say so, where you invited people to have sauna and so on. Would you be able to perhaps do the sauna project today and invite people that are Nazis or neo-Nazis and try to create a discursive platform with them? Or would you think that no, one shouldn't try to create a dialogue or a bridge towards those people today?
I don't know just if we should do it in a sauna, but I would like to do a dialogue, absolutely. I would like to meet these. Today it's not so much skinheads, it's more these neo-Nazis and organized in other way. And I would really meet people under a long time and try to do art out of that. That would be really interesting. Do you
have any ideas of what you could do with them?
Do you really want to hear that? No, I don't know. That should be the discussion with these people. I would like to hear them really talk about their ways of acting and living and their thinking, and out of that do some plays and do some children games or something to start laughing, and out of that maybe find a way to do art. I don't know. I would like to try.
I love the humble approach you have towards this. Just saying, let's start discussing and see what we can do together, and be humble towards the other. I think it's a very beautiful way of dealing with those incredibly big questions without, presenting this is my artwork, but opening up. Yeah, what do you think about this, Sara? Would it be possible today in Sweden to do such a work?
I guess you have to try. And I think this connects to this because when you are dean of an art school, as I am, there is always this moment in graduation when the students get a lot of attention in the small newspapers in the small towns where they are from. And there's this moment of pride and belonging in that, and I could see it's important for these places and these newspapers, but also for the students. And I know that you have a total different relation to your hometown, and I remember reading an interview you did quite recently in Dalarnas Tidning, was it? Where you really spit out all the hate that you had towards where you were coming from. Yeah, and it was such a interesting and rare moment. Totally unusual, I would say, to not romanticize where you came from and the tradition of Dalarna, but really just criticizing it, even hating it. And I would be interesting to hear the reactions. I thought it was a fantastic interview. It was very humoristic also, but also on the spot, really tearing apart all this way of romanticizing and fetishizing a certain place because you're born there, and the idea of ownership and belonging and also trueness of traditions that we know are invented over time. It would be interesting to hear a bit about the background of that interview. It was rare.
How much time do we have? I've been working with this for 25, 30 years. I come from this Dalarna area, and my feelings is similar to. I have a friend, an old friend who is from Kurdistan, and he talked about these clans, these groups of families living together in villages, and how difficult it was to do something out from that group. And if you were gay or just interested in art, or if you even knew what it was, but for instance music, you had to leave. It was so compact and so traditional in a way. So you really had to break and get out. And that's the same feeling with these villages in Dalarna, actually. And I understand that a lot of them really are happy in that world, and that's not my problem. I think it's just a problem that a person with another belief or another way of living not can be accepted. That's interesting. And then, I think also that Dalarna, as a symbol of Sweden, really have built up a sort of traditions that is built on lies. These folkloric clothes, for instance. If you take an example, it's not clothes that is a tradition. They were made a tradition in a way, in a certain time. And after that, you can't change it. It's the same with architectural buildings or the music. If you go just a little bit out from these traditions and do something else, you're in really a problematic situation. People hate you, and that's interesting. So I tried to use that. And do art about it and talk about these questions.
There is also a hatred aspect when it comes to the art world. I know that you, for example, did an exhibition about your father and son and the hero, two heroes. You had son and your father who never became an artist. Would you like to speak about this hierarchy that we actually have in contemporary art today, especially in Sweden, of how one should do or not do art today? Yeah, Anders Zorn is a very, very legendary painter, national romantic. Can you say that? Yeah, and he was very famous for his paintings of idealized female bodies close to the water. Can you say that? Or so, and women in nature. I'm really simplifying a lot now. Yeah.
Paintings of presidents in the United States and stuff like that. Well, he was in the end of the 19th century and beginning of the I think he died in 1920. Yes, thank you. Yeah, I think Anders Zorn is interesting because he was a self-made man in a way. Started from nothing and became one of the richest people in Sweden actually in the end of his career. And I think that's very interesting. I think that guy, he was planning from the beginning his career. He bought really expensive clothes with his first salary, and he was, building a image. And that's similar really to how the students in the academy and on and on, that was my feeling anyway, was planning their career and this art life. So I thought it in a way was interesting with a guy like that. And then my father, he was, I think, really in love with Anders Zorn and trying to do similar paintings, and we went to his museum, and so in a way Anders Zorn, this painter, and my father became one person in a way, and I thought that was interesting to attack and to redo in a way with art. So I did some exhibitions and some artworks about Anders Zorn, and trying to go into his role and his way of living and acting.
I would love to speak about a little bit the crisis also from a not only geopolitical, post-colonial, but also gender perspective. When I came to the art world and started studying contemporary art, I discovered this idea of 19th man in crisis. And at that time, there were people like Lars Nilsson, but also Magnus Bertos, that we have here today, who were very much playing with this very nonchalant male figure that was always dressed in costumes. And in your case, you were this very iconic image today where a man, a very serious, well-dressed man, is sitting and knitting. Would you say knitting or broderie? Doing broderie. And you seemed also to be in a way in some kind of crisis, male crisis, with this image of the man that is totally lost it in a way. I mean, being naked and doing a little bit, I don't know, anti-heroic things. Would you like to speak about that and how you try to deconstruct the image of a male hero, like le dégonflé, as the Frenchmen say?
Yes, in the 80s, when I went to art schools, it was really a lot of men acting, and it was these huge gestures, this new expressionism and all that. And I got really, I thought it was humorous and silly, and I got really obsessed actually about doing some sort of art about that in a way. So I did that a lot at the academy. So that's some of those things you saw maybe. And I get really stressed, and I feel in a way ashamed, I will say, about how we've been acting in like men in the art world, for instance, and in the world. So I'm really happy that, for instance, Me Too have shown another way of acting. I like that really. And yeah, in the 80s, I remember men really using the girls in the schools and all that. So it's embarrassing, and I really feel shame actually. So and of course I always use myself in a way when I'm doing art. So it's mostly me on all these pictures, and I do it out of not just telling people stuff. It's also to try to work with myself in a way. So it's not just, about racist questions, it's about everything in life.
It would be interesting to turn back a little bit to how you work, because in your work you have, in the beginning it was a lot about sculpture objects, and then it became more about photography and posters and still images, and then suddenly you turned in work more with performative and theater pieces, using actors and also using yourself. Today it's a little bit of everything, eh? You use no, it's nothing. It's really like you have built a world where you have different methods that you use at any given point of time. But it would be interesting to hear a little bit of that passage and why you choose certain materials and methods.
I think it came just out of the ideas, actually. So I had no wishes to work with performative art, or nowadays I also use film technique and the new techniques, and it's just that the ideas rules in a way. So you just have to learn something new to really reach the images or the sculpture or the thing you want to say. So it was no plan actually. It just happened.
And in '96 you did this work called Tip Top Postorder Service, where you played the role of a sewage pipe salesman who was selling pipes as interior design, so people could have pipes at home. And was this a way to, I don't know, the champion shift of context, trying to transform, I don't know, shit into gold, like Manzoni did, or what was it all about?
Yeah, of course I know my art history, but I'm a man brought up in Sweden with IKEA. So it was more of a silly gesture. We had a lot of companies like that. IKEA was, the biggest, but we had, if you remember, Galne Gunnar. It was a company selling really bad stuff, and I thought that was and also I think at the same time you had all these big artists going around the world selling in the same objects over and over again, and I thought it was like a interesting combination to do an artist selling really shitty things. so it was many levels, you could say, in that piece, and I didn't sell anything actually. I'm sad to say. So it was not a good artwork.
You didn't succeed in creating a Copernicanian shift in taste or anything like that. Yeah. You don't know how to do it.
So the pipes. Now I remember one thing, because I remember the pipes was something that you used also in the installation we did in this booth for the newspaper that we did, and that created quite some controversy because everyone thought it was so ugly. And the pipes are ugly. I mean, the color is beige, red. Yeah, I was going to come to that. and you really use that as one. It's a recurring motif in color and form, and then you have the sausage which is very similar, and then we have this, unpleasant glissant that you have in your recent pieces, where this follow curve suddenly becomes something much more threatening. It would be interesting to hear a bit about that move.
The pipes in Swedish avloppsrör, they are brownish or orange brown, and they are the pipes who are bringing the shit down, and above the earth, the surface, you have these gray pipes, and under you have these brown ones, and that was for me a really funny thing, to use those pipes as art. And also it's PVC, plastic material, and it is so dangerous to produce those pipes. So the companies in Sweden, they get special allowance to do it. So it's both scary and awful, and at the same time humorous, I think. So I use these pipes as a sort of symbol of shit and sausage and life and everything. And I tried to build, from the beginning, my wish was to try building Dalarna out of pipes. So I built houses, I tried to do a forest, I tried to build people and chairs and all these design things from Dalarna, these folkloric things, and it turned out really ugly, and I was very happy about that. And that went into other stuff with pipes, and after a while I got really scared because everything in my mind was pipes. so I had to stop actually with these pipes, and all the time, every time I tried to do something more and something new, it came back to these pipes and to the sausage, and I think now the latest exhibition I did was about my family and my young years with a father and a mother that was quite crazy, and a person in my family's one of my family's friends who was using me sexually, and this sausage came back to me, like it became a symbol of this abuse and all these horrible things. And so in a way, without knowing actually, from the 90s until today, this sausage and the pipes and all that was actually things that came up from my childhood. So I mixed all that together to do art about it, but it turned out to be sausage, and that's a symbol actually then.
Well, and how are you going to work with this subject matter then? I mean, this abuse? That's what I do now with the sausages. Yeah. Okay. So in a way, it's a formal way of dealing with your own unconscious, not only Swedish unconsciousness, but also your own. Yeah. Would you like to speak about that a little bit more? No. We can. Not all my questions. Okay, I have another question. What would you do if, for example, you would get an enormous amount of money in order to, and 3 or 4 years, and the goal would be to change Swedish mentality, to do a total work of art that could change Swedish mentality in order to, fight racism? What would you do? I know you have had some time to think about these questions that I sent you a week ago.
It's a really difficult question, because the dream is, of course, to get 4 years and a lot of millions and do some art out of that. So I was not actually thinking so much about racism and working with questions like that. But then it turned out, when I was thinking about what I would like to do, that I've been a little bit interested a long time about fathers and the lack of fathers in the families. And those times I've been interviewing skinheads, for instance, and the neo-Nazis. It's very usually so that they are out of fathers in the family when they were brought up. And that's interesting. I would really like to do some art about that.
Usually say in psychoanalysis say that la loi du père is what keeps society together. But also from a feministic point of view, we have been living in an era of la loi du père, or the law of the father. So it's how are you going to deal with that? I mean, both getting rid of the father can be sometimes good, can liberate us from a kind of domination of male white culture, but without it we can also get psychosis. So I find it very interesting. What do you think about that? The absent father figure in Nazis, should one return to the father, or should we get rid of him once and for all?
Both, I think. No, but just to connect to the pipes again, I think it's been highly interesting to see how your work has followed a certain pattern, but then coming back to questions that have been there all the time. I mean, starting with really rethinking art and art values and hierarchies, and yourself, you said that it was really about the figures of authority within the art school, your professors or art history, and then using that humor in a larger discussion, how society has structure that are repressive, and then now you are at a point where you are thinking about your own fathers and other fathers, again with these pipes as a symbol. It's both beautiful and scary, I would say, but highly valid as art right now.
I totally agree. And the system is so well put together, so well structured in a way from the beginning to the end. So I really look forward to seeing your further development. And now perhaps we should open up for the public. Do you have any questions? I'm sure you have a lot. So who wants to begin? Yeah, Marion?
Yes, I can ask the question in English, I think. Yep. Yes, I was just wondering something. You said that you had been threatened after this performance with the neo-Nazi, but what was the response when you did, for example, the Dalla Hest, the Dallicalian horse sliced into pieces? What was the reaction of the public? Have you also received kind of threatening or negative reaction for those kind of works?
No, it was more laughter and joy in a way. It was, both sides, but they were all laughing in a way. So the first time it was real threaten and real serious problems. It was with these skinheads and some other works I did at the same time, and after that they had turned up frequently actually, but I don't know. I think it's just because I'm living in Copenhagen now. It's a little bit better actually. It's not so much things happening at the moment, but it depends on what I'm doing, I guess, also at the moment with my art, turning more into my family stories. And I think it's better without these Nazis in my computer or at the door.
Can I just make a comment? Is there anyone here from Nationalism now? Oh, yeah, Linda. So we were discussing when they reopened the Nationalmuseum, in the hall with the paintings with Anders Schorn underneath one of his most famous paintings in the museum. The museum decided also to put your dollar horses underneath, and in the cultural media, this was said as a very appreciated, innovative thing, but in social media you got so much criticism for being a national museum and doing such a horrible thing to Anders Shawn. Isn't that true, Linda?
Yes, I can just confirm what you said, that it has been in social media a debate of putting the Dalahäst, and just also because it's a key painting in our collections. You showed it also in your film in the beginning, and the connection being made was by certain people not appreciated and provoking, apparently. But I guess that was the aim a little bit. I was not responsible for that installation, Margareta Ynning was, but yes.
I see the problem today is worse, actually. In the 90s, when I did it, these cutting up dollar horses, it was more laughter and joy and all that. Today, when you show a piece like that in the National Museum, it's totally different reactions, and it's interesting. 25 years.
Thank you so much. This is a really interesting, conversation to follow. I was going to ask you how you relate between your personal experience and your cultural surroundings, specifically because you say that it's better to live in Copenhagen, where we have, to be honest, a much more dire right extremist political climate, even if it's not that great in Sweden. I wanted to hear your reflection on that. Is it because it's calmer for you, or do you feel that it is a better place to be with regards to racism?
It's a good question, and I think, well, I've just been lived there for 1 year, so, but I think it's really, really interesting to learn another country's culture and way of acting. Then you learn a lot about the Swedes, actually. And we are comparing all the time about what's happening in Sweden and in Denmark, and what now, for instance, it was this election, and the Dansk Folkeparti lose some votes, and it's interesting, and we will see what's up in Sweden, what will happen there. But yes, it is really a racist country, and it's similar in some ways to Sweden, but they have a lot of really different things that I try to learn and read more about. And I don't know, I would like to experience more before I say what it will be out of. Depend on.
Yes, I have a question. I'm an artist. So my question, my name is Arnaud Labelle-Rojou, and my question is artist to artist. I'm not art historian or critic, art critic. I listen everything you say, and I have noticed that you talk a little, very much about neo-Nazi and everything. My question is, don't you think that ambiguity is a real way to do art? Just to be ambiguous, because it's a way to make people to think. If you say the response of your own position about things, it won't be as strong as if the people have to think of what you are showing. Won't you say that?
I think I agree, actually. And in the 90s, I feel that the things I was doing was quite silly, in a way. The humor was more ironic, and sometimes it was just mean. I think I'm on my way to do other more important stuff, actually. So I would like to leave the humor and the irony and just dig deeper. And yeah, we'll see what happens.
We can answer that question too.
I think one of the, very strong aspects of Peter Johansson's art is that it is ambiguous. And it really, you never really know where it is supposed to direct its conversations or questions or where it ends up. And I think, in this conversation we could see how ambiguous it was already when it seemed to be very playful and just fooling around. It was things there that we had no idea of. So I would think in full it really plays with ambiguity, also formally, with a way of using this ugly colors that we know it relates to something but we really doesn't know it, and also how you use form and cut up forms. It really in all aspects it works that plays with ambiguity.
I also think that sometimes we need visually strong languages. That's why I usually think that in order to do a caricaturistic work of art, you have to use a visual language that travels very, very fast. And I think that Russian, for example, contemporary art scene is very good at that. They are competing with what? They're competing with reklamkultur, commercial language. And today I think that you're also using that kind of very fast, you used to use this very fast language with easily recognizable symbols. And as you said, and at the same time, they are ambiguous, because I remember the first time I saw your work, I was like, wow, is it a neo-Nazis has done it? Because I saw the symbol, the Nazi symbol, and this, idealizing, also national romanticism, who has got a bad reputation, let's be honest. And so I think that you both need ambiguity, but also sometimes visually strong language, so we can get confronted to it, almost like a Fürste Spiegel that you hold, not to against the Fürste, but against society. We have to mirror. How do you say Fürste Spiegel? But the mirror that used to hold against the prince. I think it's a concept, Fürste Spiegel. No one knows. I'm sure you know.
Anyone else have a question?
No, I just wanted to add, maybe you want to do it.
No, you can do it.
That meanwhile there is maybe another question that is preparing itself, that here I think you've shown us many works that are that you've been doing like in 15 years old or something like that, maybe 10 years old, but now you are doing also other works that includes more objects, installation, sculptures. So maybe you can also talk a bit about that. And I wanted also to add that those works will be soon seen in Paris at the Swedish Institute from next November. But maybe you can also, please come.
It's my press attaché. But I think I've been doing the same thing over and over again, like Sarah said. So I've been working with sculpture and all that, and it's like circles of stuff coming back, but with a more and more serious and deeper context. It's more and more gone from the the big world into the small family world in a way, and it got more and more serious. But it's still sculpture, and it's still images, and it's still. I'm really interested in commercials, so I try to do work that is really, really easy to see and react on. But underneath, or it's a lot of different layers underneath in a way. So the first thing you see, the red color or what it could be, it's a way of getting you to see more underneath. I think.
Any more questions? Perhaps last question before we wrap it up. Yeah.
Thank you for your communication. I wanted to ask you again about this experience with the flat, which each flat had a color. Is that your project or the project of somebody else, or?
It was a research project in the United States, and I think it was in the beginning of the 80s. I read it then anyway, so maybe it was in the 70s, but it was just an article in a Swedish newspaper. Yeah.
It's more a surprise than a question. I discover a great artist, and thank you very much. I discover your eye on Swedishness, and I'm very surprised of it. It's difficult for me to see Swedishness through neo-Nazis, through skinheads, through blood red color. Maybe it tells more about you and Swedish people than I know, but maybe it's a way of seeing your own country that a foreigner cannot understand, because he can see Sweden with other eyes, with other actions, with other political realizations. That's all.
I think the Swedish tourist industry is very good. They managed to hide all these questions about our dark history and our history of quite awful things today also. So to salute to the Swedish tourist industry, I think. But underneath, I was talking about things underneath before. You still have all these strange problems like racism and all that. It's bubbling underneath and everywhere. Yes. But please come and visit us and see.
It's definitely a country. I mean, I arrived to Sweden when I was 11 years old, and we had a lot of utopic stories about Sweden. One of them was that in Sweden there were, I mean, no conflicts. No one was never hit at school, which, as a child from Romania, I found fantastic. And there was no actually either. How should I say? No one was competing. No, even put notes on people at school was something bad, and this naiveness of this country has now been, how should I say, Sweden woke up from its own dream, from this social democratic utopian dream of also folkhemmet and everything, and we discovered also what happened with, we had our own couple, our own Simone de Beauvoir and Sartre, called Alma Myrdal, the Myrdal couple, Myrdal, sorry. Myrdal. So we have a lot of things to deal with, and we have only started, I think, and that's why we really need people like you dealing as an artist with the Swedish unconscious and places like Swedish Institute, where we can deal with those questions and go deep into them. We're only at the beginning. Yeah, exactly. It's such a great title. So please come and do this collective national therapy with us. We need that. Yeah. And thank you. Thank you for. I think we should wrap it up. Yeah, and continue discussion elsewhere. Thank you so much.